Thank you for watching our webinar, Balancing Resource Capacity and Workloads with OnePlan, presented by Jim Patterson. If you enjoy this topic, please explore our YouTube channel for more recorded presentations and follow us on LinkedIn to stay in the know.
Welcome, everybody. This topic today, while we see people of all needs and capabilities and levels of maturity that come in that looking for solutions, resource capacity planning and getting a handle on that seems to be a primary pain point that we see over and over and over again by a predominantly large number of the customers that come to us. And today we're going to focus on that aspect of it in the context of an overall strategic portfolio management solution and how we can use this to our benefit as organizations to avoid overloading teams and also just making other mistakes or missteps regarding our ability to deliver resources to the initiatives that we take on. So with that, let's get started with the presentation. This is not meant to be exhaustive, but just trying to capture some common challenges that organizations face in this realm is that oftentimes they can't get a handle on their resource capacity planning because they have fragmented systems and disconnected data. Means hard to get that complete picture, manually having to mash that stuff up together. And by the time you do that, is the data already outdated and not even relevant anymore. And getting that uniform view on a real-time basis and getting in the hands of the people at the right time to make decisions is often difficult. So that lack of visibility into that overall resource availability makes it difficult to forecast accurately, makes us do some, let's just say, committing to things, maybe a little blindly or half blindly, meaning that we can over or underutilize staff dramatically. And then maybe we're not prioritizing projects effectively when we have competing priorities. And then there's resource ownership and conflicting priorities. Sometimes we have highly matrixed or segmented organizations in the cross-functional realm. Different parochial, departmental priorities may be different and in conflict with maybe the organizational priorities sometimes. We might misalign things and use resources that are very valuable and scarce on the wrong things. There's also skills mismatches and talent constraints. We might not have the right resources in the right mix, and if we don't have visibility, how do we plan to make sure we have the right resources at hand when we need them? And then there's incorrect, inaccurate, or incomplete tracking, meaning if we don't have the visibility into what's going on, how do we track where we're at on resource spend, on accomplishment for the resources spent, and those types of things. Many organizations don't factor in appropriately their non-project workload, and we'll talk about that a little bit today. And meaning that not everybody is available 100% for project stuff that comes in, and that we may overshoot by not factoring in that dimension. And then we have siloed tools and teams, meaning that work is often scattered across disparate tools, maybe different methods of work like waterfall, agile, some hybrids of those types of things. And that meaning that we might have different units of measure and not, once again, be able to get the full visibility that we're looking for across it all. And then what's the net result of all that? The external perspective industry-wide, the impacts, Project Management Institute says, if we don't get a handle on this, it can lead to burnout, especially of our more talented, more in-demand resources. There's no free lunch, so if we overcommit, generally quality is what suffers. Missed deadlines, so that part of the dimension of the triangle suffers. And then if we have burnout, we can result in high turnover, people looking for better balance and more reasonable workloads that come down their pike. Now, part of the reason we have this is people still are using Excel for this type of thing today. And why do they do it? Well, it's freely available. It's available in our mix of tools that we have. To some degree, we all know how to use it, and we may not be aware of alternatives that might be better. And the pitfalls of defaulting to this is that it's disconnected from everything else. It might be where we're doing our scheduling, where we're doing our strategic planning, where we're doing our intake and demand, all those types of things that might be disconnected, hence inaccurate, and maybe not in step with where we really are as an organizations. Formulas in Excel are highly breakable. Cells are fragile. So the idea there is that we can end up with incorrect data or tallies throughout a spreadsheet as well. And overall, it's just not efficient and believable. And sometimes by the time we get that model done, it's already out of date, like I suggested. So resource capacity planning is really part of an overall demand management process. So obviously we have demand and intake. Most organizations have more demand than they can do, and they have to select and they have to prioritize and score and maybe find some criteria for deciding what things we're going to allocate resources to. And then once we decide what we want to work on, then the real resource capacity planning happens and estimating the resources and those types of things and where we're going to put them to drive the most value in the organization. Now, what is the business value of accurate resource management and doing it well? Well, hopefully if we put them on the more high value things, we'll get better returns as an organization for the use of those existing resources, which are scarce. We also have enhanced project delivery performance. So if we make our decisions based on what we really have and our ability to apply resources to the initiatives and not overcommit or commit blindly, we're going to have a better chance of success on a delivery perspective, especially on a timeline and a quality perspective. And then once again, that reduced risk of burnout and attrition, because turnover is always going to bite us as an organization if we lose key and valuable resources as a result of all this. Now, mature approaches that I mentioned need to consider all work types. The Gartner Group put a chart out here a bit ago where it says, you really have to factor in your scheduled work, your routine or operational work that goes on to keep the doors open. And then you have to factor in that unscheduled things are going to happen, and you have to allow some bandwidth for those types of things. And the key there is, how do we factor all that in to have realistic resource plans as we do our capacity planning? And it's not a one-time thing. You don't build a resource plan, put it up on the wall and say, there's my resource plan. It has to be an ongoing rolling wave process, meaning you go from more detailed, let's just say more higher level estimates initially as you go and do things where, for example, I may know on the longer range things, what roles I might need, for example, but on the near term things, I might need more specificity as what names or what specific people that perform those roles are going to be on those things, and specifically what those allocations are quantified to, how much of their efforts needed. So we might go from less specific, higher level resource planning to more specific resource planning over time. And what we know about the things that we're going to do this week or this month are in much more specificity than the things that we're planning and are on our plate that might be happening next quarter or the quarter after that. So once again, it's an ongoing rolling process so that we get more specific as we know more. And many folks are using more agile approaches, and I talked about mixes of methodology or work methods. It becomes no less important in agile enterprises, and even if you have dedicated teams and you do scrum of scrums on individual efforts with these different teams, there generally in many organizations are scarce enterprise resources that have to be shared across all of these different teams at key points in their efforts. And the idea is that it becomes important to understand even whether or not we're overloading the teams from an agile perspective, but there are other resources in the organization, the shared resources that they might have to use. We have to factor those in, otherwise we are at risk of not delivering on the things that we're committing to. Now, we have to factor in, who we are and where we're at as an organization. For example, there are different maturity dimensions. For example, we have to factor in planning and tracking granularity. Are we as an organization that we really want to do basically headcount planning and high level by roles and maybe do FTE based types of planning? That might be all we can really handle as a level of granularity initially, as opposed to going down to detailed assignments on specific work items. Roles versus specific named resources. How are we going to plan those types of things? Is there going to be costs associated with those resources? So we want to have an output of that to be a financial aspect of the cost of these resources as we go through. Are we just going to forecast and look ahead so we understand it when we're planning, what it is we're going to need, so we have some sanity check on, are we committing to things beyond our capacity to deliver? Or are we going to track, original budgets and versus revised forecasts and then track actuals while we're in process or while we're in flight? Those are the types of things we have to ask. Are we mature enough, and do we have the discipline in the organization to do those things? Are we going to do governance and prioritization? Do we have a governance process? Do we have a prioritization scoring mechanism for objective valuation of projects as we decide whether or not to embark upon them, so we put the right resources on the right things? And is there an approval negotiation process? For example, are we in a more matrixed organization where The people that deliver or are responsible for managing the projects or the portfolio of projects may not be the people responsible or have ownership of the resources themselves. We may have to go request resources and then get approval and assignment of who we're going to get for a particular role or discipline within a certain functional area or domain in our organization. So once again, you don't necessarily have to do all of these things to get started in resource capacity planning, but we need to factor it in and be honest with ourselves of what we can actually accomplish. And then there's the concept of this top-down and bottom-up. From a more top-down perspective, it's more high level. It's more by project and initiative, not down to detailed tasks and things like that. It's really considered a higher level capacity plan, and oftentimes people maybe use this at least at their early estimate stage in that rolling wave planning process we talked about. And then they may generally use generic roles or teams that they put on here, and they're making some commitments of what it is they think that they're going to need or what the thing we're going to allocate to a particular project. And a lot of times this is done in early stage planning. Oftentimes it's just a percentage or an FTE based type of planning. And it's an easy method to get started and help maintain for an organization that's just embarking upon resource capacity planning. But some organizations stay at this level and say this is good enough for a sanity check for us to actually understand, are we overcommitting beyond our ability to deliver resources? Now, other folks maybe just do this on an early stage of a project or a portfolio. And then from a bottom up, they start building out detailed work plans, schedules, work breakdown structures, backlogs, etc. And they have individual work items. And in there, they may have specific people or roles assigned to tasks and maybe even named individual resources. And then this information then rolls up from the bottom up to an overall demand that factors into our capacity plan of what it is we think we're going to use on a resource basis. And then some organizations actually compare the two, saying, what was our early assumptions when we did that early stage planning? Now that we have detailed plannings, what do they say? And do they even line up, or do they widely vary? And then we have to maybe figure in some more adjustments on what we actually can or can't accomplish within a given time frame. So just things to consider on the resource planning side of things. Now, the Gardner Group, in a strategic portfolio management or SPM life cycle, it's all part of that. And I think to work on the right things, the number one thing it shows there, that number one is the objectives. We have to have strategies and objectives that we're trying to achieve as an organization, which ends up being like a North Star for us of what we're trying to shoot for. And then ultimately, number two is that prioritization piece, where we need to align the things that come in on our demand, both our in-flight and the new things that come in through demand management, and then figure in what it is that we prioritize and what aligns with where the organization wants to go with the strategies. And then ultimately, the resource management starts with the allocation of those resources to the things that we've prioritized and make sure that they're working on the right things, and then have forecasts of what it's going to take from a resource perspective to get there. And then you go through that cycle, you deliver. Hopefully you deliver the value that you expect to get the outcomes. But as you replan overall, that resource planning function comes into it at every step of the way with each iteration. So this is really meant to depict that demand management intersects at some point with resource capacity planning. If we look down below, when we, in the blue that talks about resource planning specifically in and of itself, we may build a resource pool and identify the generic roles that we have and determine how many of each that we have. We might have identified constraining resources and people that, like we said, like those shared resources that may be scarce. But then the ideation process is happening in request processes happening in the demand realm in parallel with that. We might have ideas that get submitted. We might say, all right, is this even worth pursuing? A go, no go to do further evaluation and build a business case? Do we even invest time in this request or idea? And then ultimately we come out with this proposed portfolio that is then going to intersect, and we're going to have to say, hey, do we have the resources to do this? And this is where the resource dimension comes in. And at some point, you have to match that high level demand to the supply of the resources you have. Typically, there's some governance or steering committee or some equivalent of that in the organization that assesses what it is we're going to greenlight as far as these initiatives. And then we have to request specific resources out of that pool in order to get going on this. So once again, this doesn't act independently. This is not something that just is done in a spreadsheet off to the side. Now, OnePlan is designed as an AI-enabled strategic portfolio management platform that helps organizations address a lot of things in a comprehensive and holistic way, of which optimized resource and capacity planning is one of the main things people come to us for, is to get a holistic view and a common hub for all this. Not only do we connect execution to strategy, deliver real-time visibility and insights, we unify tools and teams for people that have disparate tools and different work methods and delivery models. We support hybrid delivery models, and also we support the financial management aspect of this. So once again, you can actually have this resource capacity planning in the context of just one dimension of an overall portfolio management discipline. So OnePlan, I'm not going to go into this in a whole lot of detail, but there's the demand side of actually outlining the strategy of where you're going, having a funnel of ideas and requests that are coming in, factoring in other mitigating factors like products and applications that you're going to depend on to deliver these types of things. But ultimately, you're going to decide on a portfolio through steering committees, portfolio managers, et cetera. But a key dimension, that second node in that planning realm, is that capacity planning. If you don't factor in that aspect of it, you're going to make potentially unrealistic choices or leave money on the table if you're not aligning with the right things. And one of the key things we're going to talk about here today is that what if scenario modeling. The resource capacity dimension of that really factors into that. As things change and you reassess your portfolio as frequently as you need to, because it really needs to be a living, breathing operation, what is the resource impact at every step of the way by what we're selecting in the scenarios that we model? Do we have the wherewithal of the resource bandwidth to do the things we're considering? And then there's the execution side of things. We'll talk about individual project resource planning on individual projects as we go through the demonstration, but that's another key component of this. And ultimately, the visibility comes down to reports and dashboards and views. And we'll show some examples of that today in the demonstration of the product. Now, Sophia, as you hear from most technology discussions you have today, at some point we're talking about AI. And Sophia GPT is our artificial intelligence assistant that can help us in all dimensions of what you see up above, and definitely can help us on the resource capacity planning side of things. Ultimately, we want to do the right work, select the right things with the highest value for the organization, and then execute well. And to execute well, we have to have, let's just say, a reasonable assessment of our ability to provide resourcing to complete it. Now, one more dimension of this is that in a full governance process from demand through planning and then through execution, we need to factor in the resource planning side of this, right? But, yes, there's a PMO potentially in portfolio management or an enterprise portfolio management, an EPMO involved, but each domain or department, for example, in your organization may have their own unique needs and for visibility and those types of things. And one of the things, other than OnePlan being a central hub, is its ability to have tailored, personalized lenses into the solution and the data there that meet the needs of the different constituencies in your organization. I think the ability to do that and still provide the flexibility each of those areas needs while still meeting the needs of the organization as a whole is one of the key strengths of OnePlan. And the other thing that people come to us for is that they often have disparate tools around the organization, and trying to pull that together, like we talked at the outset of this presentation, is sometimes a challenge. And we're not suggesting that you should use a ton of different tools for planning and execution, but if you have some that are entrenched, some that people are invested in, or some that different parts of your organization refuse to let go of, we can connect and leverage that data to bring it in and make it part of the overall portfolio, and also part of that resource capacity planning discipline. And for those of you that are Microsoft shops, we are built on the Microsoft cloud. We are fully integrated in the Microsoft ecosystem, and actually is a seamless user experience without separate logins and separate domains and those types of things. The idea is that you can rest assured that this will fit nicely into your daily use of the Microsoft tools and the Microsoft platform. So what we're going to talk about today is choosing the right work with confidence and clarity, and factoring in the resource capacity. We'll talk more about this here today. We'll also talk about just balancing resource capacity with demand and what views you can actually see these things and make those trade-offs and do some balancing in order to get to the right end state or the right solution for what it is that you're looking to do. And then connecting the tools, we talked about that already. And then we'll show some examples of using Sophia from an AI perspective as we go through this and show some examples that make sense across all of this. Now, to do that, I'll bring in OnePlan. And because we're focused on resource capacity planning today, I'm not going to go in detail on some of the other dimensions, but I'm going to touch on them. In this particular case, for example, objectives and key results, being able to set out strategies that end up being our guideposts or our North Star to where we want to go as an organization. And that no matter what stage we're in that governance process, we should always have an eye on what it is the organization is trying to achieve, and does the things we want to do or that we propose to do align with those and help support the achievement of those. And if they don't, we should consider, should we be doing those things? And ultimately, these strategies, as we focus in on ideas or requests that comes in, people may vote on them. People may have a prioritization scoring mechanism. We may factor in what kind of resourcing it's going to take or what kind of budgeting it's going to require. But when we actually decide what to actually embark upon as an organization and what should actually make it to our portfolio of things that we actively work on, it should factor in the strategic dimension as well as others as to whether or not we should pursue this or promote it into a portfolio. Now, ultimately, it's all about that portfolio of projects and initiatives and the resourcing it's going to take to do it. So as a fundamental piece of OnePlan and how this fits into the overall, I'm just going to talk about the portfolio and say that, you know, we have a flexible portfolio of set of plan types, and we can manage, you know, waterfall efforts like we're calling projects and more agile efforts, which we're calling epics. We might have services engagements or things like that, but this portfolio plan type hierarchy is something that would be specific and structured the way you look at the world as far as an organization goes. And we have other variations that different special interest groups can use. But for example, in this case, I've got a portfolio level, I've got programs within the portfolios, and then I've got projects and epics and engagements potentially within those. And one of the things that you'll see here, and this isn't the focus of our presentation today, but you'll see icons from different tools in the marketplace, and we'll show examples of where you have options to do that. But you might have planning data that's coming into a specific project or epic from another solution, a Microsoft project, a planner, Azure DevOps, Jira, Smartsheet, etc., that can bring in and feed into this mix. That does not need to be a barrier to you having a comprehensive resource capacity plan. So those are the things that want to make sure that you know, and one of the things that OnePlan brings to the table. But outside of this hierarchical view with the plan type hierarchy, let me just go to a view that's more resource focused. In this particular case, I'm going to the project effort summary view. And in this particular case, I have a list of all the projects. I have roll-ups of the data that are coming in from it. What's the committed effort? What's the scheduled effort from the detailed schedules? What actual hours may have been coming in from timesheets? How much is remaining? What variances we have? And we can have other variations of the theme here. We're also having a KPI on effort health, on are we tracking on the effort health as well. Now, within that, you could take and this at any given point in time in this, and we can always look at the time phase resource planning at the bottom of this. Now we're going to focus and go into the details of building a comprehensive enterprise resource plan to there, but just know that even while you're looking at the portfolio list itself, you can always interject the resource capacity plan to see where the potential bottlenecks may be at any given point in time, or where the overcommitments might be. Okay. Now from this project effort summary view, right, we can also do things like slice it in different ways. Let's just say I got rid of that resource plan grid at the bottom. Let's just say I wanted to look at this from, grouped by the different business units we have or departments that we have in our organization. Oops, typing. And let's go into the business unit. Now, instead of a predefined hierarchy, I'm now looking at this by grouped and summarized by the different business units and the projects that are in there and the resources that are allocated to those business units. I could either do different ones, or I can even nest this yet again. And one way I might do that is I might look at that um, um, the business unit, and then maybe I'll put it in, maybe I'll add an overall health status um, um, into this. And if I go into the overall health, now I can see that here's the subset of, in this operations group, I have some that are at risk and some that are on track. From an overall health perspective, in addition to the effort health, are we over or underspend on those types of things? So once again, we can get really good views of this at any given point in time within the solution. If I also go in and I look at another view that might have some additional data points in it, I might consider using Sophia at this point to do some analysis. I've got all these different things that are working. I can interject Sophia at any given point in time. And let's just say, given the project summary, let me do this. It's a lot of typing, so I'm just going to cut and paste a prompt that, and it's basically, what are the top 5 projects we should consider putting on hold, considering prioritization score, benefits, committed effort versus schedule effort, and percent done. And as it goes to consider that, given the data points that are in here, as I'm doing some analysis in here, it's basically giving me a list of the projects and why and the rationale behind that. And I might even say, just for more clarity in here, I might even say to it as a follow-on question or prompt, display these requested data points in a table format. And as I expand this out, we can start seeing what it was looking at. I have low or no prioritization score in here. I have varying levels of benefit. I have committed effort that I made, but nobody's built a schedule on these things. There's no scheduled effort on here. And some of them have varying levels of percent done. So the idea here is using criteria to help analyze these things. And you can ask it a variety of prompts and a series of prompts to get help in you analyzing this. And this is just one example of that. Now, we actually provide some sample ones that you can use, and you can also create your own that you might use on an ongoing basis and then pin them here just like these so that you can actually use them on a recurring basis if you find ones that you like and you want to use. Now, the other part about OnePlan on the resource side of things, for those of more agile-oriented folks, we have board views. And in this particular case, I got a board of projects by state, and then I have a roll-up of what it means from a dollar perspective. And so I've got over $6.7 million of active projects in here that I'm working on in this active state, right? But you might want to show it by another constraint. So for example, if I show this with committed effort, right? Now I'm looking at, specifically, I'm interested in what I'm saying is in the active state. I basically are saying that 30,000 hours is the most that I can apply to this, but I've got cards in here of projects that say that I'm going to need 34,664 hours to make that happen. And as I go through to this, whether I'm doing program increment planning, whether I'm doing some other type of planning here in a more Kanban style, I could say, what if I decided to put this on hold, and I can start reducing this number to something that's more doable with what I have. So once again, I can leverage that resource information that we're going to talk about how we build up in here and use that as a constraint as we're doing planning, even from a Kanban or a board perspective within this. We even have people on the Agile side that just want to know how many elements are we working on, and it's just a work in process. In this case, we're saying we don't want to do any more than 25 active elements or projects in here, and I've got 30 in here right now. So it's a red flag to me to maybe whittle this down or reanalyze this as I go through. Other views that we have are roadmap views, and that roadmap view could be from a variety of different things. So if I go look at, say, in the roadmap, let me see the project portfolio roadmap. And this one has a grouping by the portfolio that it's in, and it's got color by its status, whether it's on track or off track, red, yellow, green. But I can use this and use it in a variety of different ways. So for example, I could go in here and say, what if I wanted to look at this by effort health, meaning am I doing well with my resource expenditures on this project? And all of a sudden it highlights different projects. In this particular case, I'm seeing I got 2 that are in red that are off track. and I can drill into those and look at the details around that at any given point in time. I could even change the swim lanes if I wanted to. I might want to group this by, well, I don't know. Let's do it by strategic alignment. Now, oops, no, I didn't get the strategic investment. I wanted strategic alignment. Now I can see these are extremely well aligned items. Here are low strategic alignment. Here's one that's at risk, but it's not well aligned with our strategies. And here's one that's got moderate alignment, and it's red. So once again, I can take different perspectives on the same data, some of it resource oriented as I go through. Now, if I go back to the list view here and I start drilling into specific projects or efforts or initiatives here, I'm going to drill into this data warehouse migration, and there's a lot of data you can put in here to have a detailed summary page that has metadata, data, summarized data about how we're doing on schedule, how we're doing on financials, how we're doing on our use of effort in here, etc. But what I'm going to focus on here today is the resource plan effort on this, right? So if I go into the resource plan for this particular project, this is where on an individual project you can really plan to whatever level of detail you want. This is where you can plan with either generic resources like a business analyst or a project manager initially, or you can have named individuals. You can even plan here with teams if you like, for if you're doing more team-oriented type of planning as you go through here. And when you look at this, in this particular case, I'm looking at what's called a committed plan, which correlates to that top-down planning we talked about earlier on. I can do this plan long before I have a work plan or a schedule. I don't need detailed tasks or whatever like this. And I can even plan in terms of hours. In this case, I got by month. I can plan in terms of hours like you see here. I can in terms of percentages or FTEs or full-time equivalents. And the full-time equivalents tells me that Jared Dunn, for example, here has got 45% or 0.45 FTEs here. But what's nice about having a holistic system like this is it has an eye on the rest of the system in here. So even though I'm not a full head in here on this particular month, it says I'm already allocated almost 2 heads on other things within the system. Now we have red examples here, like to say, but I would submit that if we have visibility like this all the time, it would be very hard for us to overcommit people to these degrees if we can't put them on things when we consciously know we're giving them that type of overallocation. We can preclude that by having that visibility constantly and knowing where people are already scheduled at any given point in time before we actually put them on anything else. Okay. Now, you might have this committed and you might have this scheduled, which is a roll-up of the detailed schedule plan that's there. But as I go through here, for example, let's just say I have a generic resource assignment here and business analyst, and I've got to figure out who's going to do this work, right? And I've got the allocation of what's going to be required here on the business analyst side of things. And I can find candidates at any given point in time. And I can either do things like saying, find a best match. And now it's looking at all what it considers the business analysts across the organization that I could potentially use. I could see, for example, here that Jan Levinson looks like she might be a good fit on here. And I might then say, replace that generic up there with Jan and decrement from her remaining availability that you see up here. I could also do the same thing with an overloaded Jared, right? I could sit here and say, what would be a good match for replacement for Jared? And I can see that the choices aren't as great here for Jared for what we want to do with him, but I might find somebody who might have allocation here, like a Steve McGarrett, that could fit this into his workload, especially here in April and May, and do a replacement there. Now, we don't have to just do best match. Whatever categorization you use for your resources in here, you can actually find them by whatever metadata you have around your resources. So for example, if I wanted to look specifically by role and I wanted to find for a project manager what the availability of project managers are right now, I could just do that by role. If I wanted to find it by business unit or something like that, and I could say, who do we have in IT that I can get? What roles are available in IT? If you decide you want to add other metadata on things there like location or primary skill or whatever it might be, you can do those things and use those as search criteria for whittling down those resources that you want. Once again, having this visibility helps us preclude us from unwittingly over allocating people and getting ourselves into commitments that we can't live up to. Okay. Now, if I go into the other resource plan type, we can also do bottom-up resource allocation. And what this is on this scheduled work resource plan type that we have here, what it's doing is instead of from the top down saying, hey, I need Bertram 25% a month on this project, it's taking the detailed schedule or the work plan and taking the detailed tasks or work items and rolling up the allocations that he has in these different periods of time. So once again, some folks go to the bottom up, some folks never get there. But if you do a combination of both of those things, right, we can actually compare those things and see if our original assumptions are even valid. So as I look at my committed plan up here, I could look at things like a comparison and basically say, if I want to compare the committed to the scheduled plan just for this one project, I can actually see that in this particular case, I can see that Bertram, we planned about 14% of his time in May, but the schedule says we're going to need about 24% of his time. Once again, highlighting the fact that we're using him more than we thought. On the other hand, we thought we were going to use him about a quarter time here in April, and it looks like there's nothing in the schedule in here for April. So, he might be freed up in April to do other things when we thought he might be taken up in April by this project. So once again, good comparisons. And the same thing holds true when we look at timesheet data, which is actuals as well. Okay. Now, if you go into the work plan itself, from the bottom up perspective, we have all the rich capabilities of resource assignment in here as well. So to roll up to that schedule type, you can assign individual resources in here, percentages of their time, hours estimates that roll up into that scheduled type. And on this planning view, you can see that, or you can actually go into things like an effort view, kind of like you would do up in the portfolio, but down here at the individual work plan level, right? And you can actually have, planned effort, actual effort, remaining effort, all those types of things in there for your resources. But we also have the ability to do more agile planning in a backlog perspective. So if I go to look at, say, a backlog work type, I have updates. I'm not going to approve them now. And if I expand this plan out, what you'll see here is I've got some user stories and features in the backlog here, and I'm rolling in story points. And I could roll in story points and or hours both into this and bring those in. Now, you could bring those in from another tool like an Azure DevOps or a Jira, or as we could do in the schedule work type. For the ones that do more waterfall planning, we could bring these in from a variety of other tools that we have built-in connectors for, so that you can bring in that data at any given point in time, so nothing is left out when you roll up that bottom-up plan. Okay. The other piece in there is that in here you can also have as assignable items for a workload. If you assign people things like issues that they need to deal with and they're significant, you can assign individual resources to those things and have it added to their workload should you think it's significant enough to make that happen, so you can decrement from their availability at any given point in time. So any work type can be incorporated into this. Now, ultimately, I'm looking at this from an individual project perspective, right? As an organization, you're going to want to roll this up to an individual resource plan or an overall resource plan. And now here at this, system-wide view, I'm now looking at individual people, right? And I can do the same committed, resource plan, scheduled, timesheets, etc., actuals. But as I look at this, if I drill into Bertram this time from here, I can see, and let me look at Bertram from an FTE perspective instead of hours. And there I can see that he's almost 2 FTEs here in June, and slightly over allocated here in July. And what drives that is that now I can see all the different projects that he has allocations on that are driving this all the way from the bottom up. As I go in here, I could say very clearly, I said, maybe I can help him by getting him off a couple of these things, right? So if I came in here and I said, well, let's see if I can get him off of this user enhancements piece and come in here and say, find candidates, I can see that I do have candidates that I could actually do replacements on with him and actually do that replacement right here. And it looks like I'd have to do that on more than one project for him in order to get him down to a sane workload here in June. But once again, I can do this not only in the individual project level, but here at that global view as well, okay? Now, if I go here looking at the scheduled work type, which is the bottoms up view, and I go into Bertram, now I can see all the things that he's got work plans for that's rolling up. And if I go into this facility expansion, I can see he's very well allocated across a myriad of tasks here within this facility expansion project over that period of time. And so once again, I can get there and I can even go in to see if perhaps he's needed on that, or potentially I might decide that maybe we should get him on another task or get somebody else on that task if we're trying to offload some of his work as well. So once again, that visibility that gives us the ability to look at all that stuff. And if I collapse this and I go to look at, once again, that same view where I compare, say, the scheduled to the committed, at the higher level of all those things, I get that full view of what we committed versus what we've scheduled and what the deltas or the hotspots are where we have overshot or undershot on our estimates on what we're looking at there. Now, also, we can also look at different views of this. So if I'm interested in how we're doing on specific roles or business units, now I've got it all rolled up by the different roles. And let me go to FTEs again, where I can see, for example, here I need 11 developers in July, and I've only got 5, right? And so as I come through here, I can see that I've got 5 individuals, some of which are very much got a lot of red in here. I've also still got generic developers in here that I still haven't put names to. And as we get closer to these timeframes, I got to figure out what names I'm going to put on these things potentially if I'm going to get down to a named individual resource level. And this type of thing gives us the alert that we need to do something here. So for example, here, if this is the earliest piece in here on this cybersecurity enhancement, I may want to figure out who I can put on this. And I do have people I can put on this in those timeframes, it looks like, from the availability here that we've got. So once again, helping us stay on top of this in a rolling wave fashion and stay on top of these things as things change and as things evolve, okay? For those in your organization that aren't going to be hands-on within OnePlan itself, we do have the availability to do reports. And in those reports, we have the ability to look at things more globally. And here I'm looking at resource histograms. I've got higher level elements. I can slice them right by different departments in here and look at what those mean for different departments. I can even go down and say, let me see how I'm doing on things like, let me just do it by role. And then let's do it by role. And if I was interested in how we're doing on the developer resources, now I've got a histogram of where we're over allocated on developers, and also a highlight of who my most over allocated people are in there as we go through. Just like when I did and I selected all, right? Here are, across all the resources, the ones that are most severely used or abused from the allocation perspective as we go through. So once again, I've got good information that now I can share with even people who are looking at it just strictly from a reporting perspective and aren't necessarily transactionally within OnePlan. I guess that brings me last to the, well, let me do this. Let me go to a resource summary view. And let me go to Sophia. And let me just ask her, let me use one of the ones that are here. Rank resources by highest risk and explain why. And based on the plan that we have here. So it's talking to me about Toby Stevens and Daniel Williams, significant overages in the time frames that they are, and basically giving me the allocations there. I could also ask the same questions here about things like who's overutilized, who's underutilized, right? I can ask questions about, which resource roles do I need to hire and how many of each role that I might be short on. And et cetera. So once again, Sophia can come in very handy for us in helping do more detailed analysis based on multiple parameters. Now, the last thing I'll probably finish with is the modeler in OnePlan. And if I go to start from the beginning here, you can establish any number of models. In this case, we got different models or folders here that are by different parts of the organization. But let's just say I was going to do an enterprise model and I was looking at 2025 project planning. Now this model will allow me to do different scenarios within here. So potentially I've got 35 things that I'm considering doing. And this could be as big or as small as you want it to be. And you can have the data elements you want to consider in here, things like prioritization and benefits and committed effort and when the timeframes are that we want to start them, et cetera. And with that, I can say, all right, if this is my potential world of things that I'd like to do, both active and proposed things combined, I can come in here and say, from a resource perspective, do I have the ability to do these things? And I can see that I still got red and bottlenecks that I've got to do in here. So it may not be quite doable in its current form if I do it as it is. And I can even look at it from the financial and budget perspective, whether I have the dollars. But as I go through this, I can start doing scenarios whereby I select or deselect projects, right? Or I can interject a timeline in Gantt in here, and I can start moving things out and stage things in different timing to fit within certain parameters. And when I do that, I can go look and say, well, what if I have a $3.5 million budget in here, right? And I go in here and I limit to this and I start deselecting things till I get down within a certain budget realm. I might do that and see that, all right, I'm down around that $3.5 million realm. I'm getting closer to that, but I still got more work to do. But if I do a sanity check with that, I can also look and see, what does this mean from a resource perspective? Well, I can see that I've got a little bit of red hotspot in here, but it's not quite to the degree it was. So I might have to whittle down a couple more projects to do that and save that scenario. Now, once again, I might want to try and stretch myself, and I might want to do, say, a $4 million scenario, or do a scenario that's based on hours used of resource and those types of things across the board. And once again, as we look at that, we can look at what those things mean from a comparison perspective. For example, I can look at, I did a $3.5 million and a $4 million scenario. In one of them, I can get 13 projects done. The other one, I can do 16. I got budget, and then I got total committed effort, so I can see whether or not it's within the total committed effort. And it looks like both of them are within the total committed effort. I just had a couple of red hot spots I needed to resolve. And then I can also ask myself about the benefit side of things, right? Is it worth me going out and getting another $500,000 to do these 3 other projects? Now, another $500,000 could get me almost another $5 million in benefit. It might be worth my while to find that funding if for some reason I can get that done, because I can get more value to the organization and make sure I get the resources on those things that are going to deliver that value. The other comparisons that we have in here are on things like, did we include the right things? Did we overlook anything? Portfolio management often uses bubble charts. In this particular case, you can do different axes in here for different data points, but this one I got benefits versus prioritization. And I can see for the projects that we selected, I can see the size based upon their budget. I can see where they fit from a prioritization score versus a benefit. Higher benefit things out here. The majority of things are above the midpoint on the prioritization score line. But I could also go in and interject the unselected plans and say, is there anything in here we should have considered that we shouldn't have? And we do have some high priority, but lower benefit types of things. And some of those might be compliance and those types of things. But once again, we can assess these from another dimension as we assess whether or not we should change our course and reselect or re-rack our portfolio. And the other point that I would say is the visualizer. Now, we have the ability to visualize things in a variety of ways within the system. And in this particular case, it's being used to say, all right, in this scenario, what did I select? And did I overlook any predecessors that I have to have? So if I really have to have this SEO optimization to do the market research piece, I might want to go in here and look and say, maybe I reconsider something else if I need to fit this in lieu of something else. The other dimension is the strategic alignment, and we talked about strategy. Now, as I look at this, I can see, I've got all these plans that tie back to objectives and key results, but all of a sudden I've got this distribution optimization that doesn't seem to be driving towards a specific objective or a key result. What else do I have? I have a data integration for predictive maintenance that isn't tied back to any strategy. So the question is, did I overlook aligning that with a strategy, or is it really not aligned? And should I reconsider putting that in the selected area? Should I replace it with something else? Once again, there's a resource impact to all these things, making sure we're putting the resources on the right things in our organization. Okay. Now, you can do these types of analysis on a departmental basis. As I mentioned about the different lenses, for example, if I am actually, in product development, my view in this might be a little different. I might be looking at this instead of by portfolios. I might be looking at it in terms of products and product lines, and I can be aligning different projects and epics that support the delivery of these projects into that view. I could also look at, for example, if I'm in professional services and I'm delivering services to our customers, I might look at it by accounts and the different engagements we have here, all of which that would have a resource aspect to it, right? The same thing as if we were managing an application portfolio. We might then look at things by the different business capabilities these applications are supporting, and then look at the things in the different projects and epics that are supporting, and we can look at the effort that's associated with them. So once again, hopefully I've showed the resource capacity planning in the context of all the different dimensions of overall good portfolio management disciplines. So with that, let's go to a summary and next steps. I think next steps is, and I think it's important when I talked about the resource capabilities, that you should assess your readiness and be honest with yourself about where you're at and understand your resource management maturity and understand your culture and your environment and your willingness to do some of these things. And build a resource management roadmap that's realistic, and then develop a practical action plan to get to the next maturity level. If we're not doing it today, let's take, as the picture says, baby steps and define your process first, and then let's automate it within a tool like OnePlan. Resource management is a critical success factor for organizations today. An approach and a process should align with our maturity. High-level capacity planning is a good place to start. More detailed resource allocation can follow as you need to or as you're ready to do it. And OnePlan provides a great platform for all these strategic portfolio management capabilities that include all aspects of top-down and bottom-up resource planning. It can connect to your various execution tools and feed that data into this hub to be factored into the resource planning discipline. And it's fully integrated and embedded in the Microsoft Cloud, as I had mentioned before. So once again, it gives you a way to do this in a not disconnected way, like we might be doing in spreadsheets today. Now, OnePlan, we do this as a discipline for strategic portfolio management overall. This is not just a tool in our bag. This is what we do. We help people get better in these disciplines. We're recognized in a strategic partnership with Microsoft in this realm. We were recognized for 5 years as their partner of the year in the PPM and project and portfolio management disciplines, as well as recognized by the key analysts in a variety of different ways. We're substantially growing and backed by private equity. And just if you're concerned about this, we have a secure platform. We are SOC 2 compliant, and we're certified in ISO 27001 and 27701. So just be aware that we're a player in here and a player of substance that's been recognized in a lot of different ways. We have customer testimonials. If you go to our website, you'll get a copy of these slides, and you can look at people that have actually gotten the value from our solutions in here. As well as, if you want to learn more, we do webinars like this all the time. We have upcoming ones that are coming in addition to this one. Our next one is on the 31st about how to confidently manage project budgets and avoid surprises with OnePlan. We also have a rich library in there of on-demand webinars that we've done over the years. We do these almost weekly. So if you go to oneplan.ai/webinars, there's a lot of resources out there for you to consume. Now, we're not just a software provider. We're a full one-stop shop for you. If you need help implementing a solution like this, education and training on the tools and disciplines. We have a customer success organization that makes sure our customers do succeed. And advisory services, we do help people build those roadmaps and help envision where they want to go. And we do offer a business strategy workshop that helps people kind of assess current state future desired state and what it would take to get there, and understand maybe some of the trade-offs that you might have that you need to consider. We also do free trials. So if you go out to oneplan.ai/solutions, you can incorporate a trial. I recommend the strategic portfolio management one because it has the one that's fully capable with all the things that I showed you today and more. So just consider engaging with us. We have a free business strategy workshop that we can do for you. We have a free trial and support. We'll chaperone that trial for you, with you, to make sure you get the outcomes you're looking for in the trial. Or if you're not even there yet and this high-level demo today wasn't enough, schedule a one-on-one demo with us and we'll address your specific questions and pain points and needs. Just reach out at contact@oneplan.ai and we're happy to get you connected with the right people. And if you just want to learn more, go to www.oneplan.ai. We have a lot of resources out on our website that'll help you investigate that further. So with that, I'd just like to thank you for your time today. I know we filled up just about the whole hour today, and hopefully you got some value and some ideas and some possibilities of how you can better manage your resource capacity plans and make sure that you don't over-allocate, or, to be quite honest, under-allocate resources or misappropriate resources under the things that aren't going to truly add value and achieve your company's strategies. Have a great day.